we've reached the end. So, and of course, the end is Adon Olam, and this is a poem, a prayer, much abused. But,
musically or no?
Well, we can decide. Definitely musically. We don't know for certain who wrote Adon Olam. The legend is that it was written by Solomon Ibn Gabirol, who was a Spanish poet in the golden age of Spain. He was a court poet who wrote both religious and secular poetry. He was filled with existential angst. He thought nobody understood him. He felt very alone. He was unsuccessful in love, and wrote some of the most beautiful poetry that we have. It was a time when there was just tremendous flourishing of arts. Jews had really taken the best of art and culture from the Arabic world and had made it Jewish. So a lot of the poetic forms that were being used were built on Arabic poetry, although they were using Hebrew. Although, there were Jewish poets who were writing in Arabic as well. I took an entire semester-long class on the poetry of Ibn Gabirol.
Really?
World expert in Ibn Gabirol. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Your next class?
Very difficult. I'm not sure that Adon Olam was written by him necessarily, but just that's the rumor. So we're probably all at least somewhat familiar with the sound of Adon Olam. But what I want to talk about is what it means, because I think it does mean something quite profound. And just as we saw with Anim Zmirot, this poem, this religious poem, which is expressing ideas of philosophy and theology, the difficulty of relating to an all-powerful, all-knowing God who is the creator of the universe, and how can we possibly know that God? And we saw that it imagined or saw God in kind of two different forms: the kind of the upper kavod and the lower kavod, the part that's too distant for us that we want to relate to, and the lower kavod, the part of God that is manifest in the world through all sorts of acts of divine power. Adon Olam is also going to deal with I think something that is a theological conundrum, although I think it's going to deal with it in an extremely personal way. So let's start with the Bible, and ask the question: how does the Bible view God's kingship? Right, the prayer Adon Olam, Adon means ruler or master. Olam means either the world or eternity, so either space or time. Usually in the Bible, Olam is more a sense of eternity, a sense of time. In modern Hebrew, Olam means the world, the physical world. So we have both time and space captured in this word Olam. But we start with the Bible, and as we saw in Anim Zmirot, which was heavily influenced by biblical passages, although the author did extremely creative things with them. Adon Olam, at least in the language, is not as influenced, not as reliant upon biblical poetry as Anim Zmirot was, but it is kind of reacting, at least in some ways, to what's expressed in the Bible. So here's our question: what does it mean that God is king in the Bible? So here's a good example. Psalm 93. It's good because it's short. It's only 5 verses long. So let's read it, and let's try and get a sense of what it means for God to be king of everything. So it begins: Adonai malach lavesh Adonai oz hit azar aftikon tevel bal timot. The Lord is king, he is robed in grandeur. The Lord is robed, he is girded with strength. The world stands firm, it cannot be shaken. Nachon kisacha me'az me'olam ata. Your throne stands firm from of old, from eternity you have existed. Nas'u naharot Adonai, nas'u naharot kolam, yisu naharot dochyam. The ocean sounds, O Lord, the ocean sounds its thunder. The ocean sounds its pounding. Mikolot mayim rabim adirim mishpereyam, adir b'marom Adonai. Above the thunder of the mighty waters, more majestic than the breakers of the sea, is the Lord, majestic on high. Edotecha ne'emnu me'od leveitcha na'ava kodesh, Adonai le'orech yamim. Your decrees are indeed enduring. Holiness befits your house, O Lord, for all times. So what does it mean that God is king, at least in this psalm?
Well, he's robed, and he's part of everything on earth, the ocean, the sounds, the waters, he's
in charge.
Yeah,
He's
but it's
eternal.
earthly. He's such a part of earth, of our realm.
I think this word enduring is important. The idea that God is kind of the master of all these chaotic things, that they persist. And even in the first verse, it's mostly talking about God. It's kind of these abstract qualities that are associated with God metaphorically. God doesn't have a body to be robed. That's a metaphor. And then it jumps to the world stands firm. It cannot be shaken, without explicitly making a connection there. But I guess we're meant to infer that because of these strength and grandeur of God, that the world is persisting.
Mm-hmm. We have some echoes of creation here.
Oh yeah, from
right?
eternity, forever.
When you say, from eternity versus, usually you hear it moving forward rather than coming.
All right, so Me'az. Me'az is from then, from old. That's how they've translated it. Olam, from Olam are you. So what does Olam mean? Probably it means eternity, right? May is from the past, though. Okay. So we start with some kingly, very explicitly kingly references. When we're talking about earth and waters, that should evoke creation right there. I mean, because that is God's act of creation, is to separate the waters and make space for land. So in a sense, God is the conqueror of waters.
I think it's interesting that it starts with from eternity and then it ends with enduring. Flying from all time through all time.
Yeah, we have le'orech yamim. We translate this for all times. Orech yamim is like length of days, for length of days. I'm not sure that we have a concept of forever here. I'm not sure that forever existed in kind of the human mind. I don't know if the concept of infinity had been discovered yet at this point.
I thought eternity meant forever, like forever, always.
Yeah.
Are you implying that this posits that the world was created at a certain point, it will end at a certain point, and even though that's a long amount of time, it's a finite amount of time?
Right. So, I mean, there's no sense of before creation or after creation in this, right? All we have is creation.
Yeah. But at the end, it's talking about enduring and for all times. So to me, that sounds very futuristic.
Although le'orech yamim, for all times, le'orech yamim is for length of days. So still, if we're talking about days, we're still talking about within the existence of the known universe, right? I mean, that's what God does. God's first act of creation of saying, let there be light, creates the first day. All right. So
I'm not, but when you look at from eternity, you have existed. I'm not sure what the Hebrew exactly says, but that to me doesn't necessarily say it's they don't know when God.
We don't know when it is. I would say it's ambiguous. The psalm is ambiguous. That's the most we can say about it. So when we look at Adon Olam, we'll see something a little different. Okay, so all right. So now this question: what does it mean? What does eternity mean to God according to the Bible? So again, we're going to look at a couple of other examples. So here's one, just a single line: Adonai Melech Olam Va'ed Avdu Goyim Me'artzo. So the previous one, if you remember, it began with Adonai Malach. Here we have Adonai Melech. Right. So God, the Lord, or Adonai, is King, Olam Va'ed, forever and ever. Avdu Goyim Me'artzo. The nations will perish from his land. Right. Why are these two together?
God will outlast them.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's look at the next example. This is from Isaiah 24:21-23. V'haya bayom hahu yifkod Adonai al tzva hamarom b'marom ve'mochei ha'adama al ha'adama. In that day, the Lord will punish the host of heaven in heaven and the kings of the earth on earth. Right? Bayom hahu, in that day. That sound familiar? Bayom hahu?
Yeah.
From what?
Alenu.
Alenu, right?
Yeah.
You talked about Alenu, right? So, all right. Ve'asfu asefa asir al bor v'sugru al masger umerov yamim yipakedu. They shall be gathered in a dungeon as captives are gathered, and shall be locked up in a prison. But after many days they shall be remembered. Ve'chafra halavana v'osha hachama ki malach Adonai tzvaot b'har Tzion v'Yerushalayim v'neged zkenav kavod. Then the moon shall be ashamed and the sun shall be abashed. For the Lord of hosts will reign, and the Lord of horses, the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and the presence will be revealed to his elders. So here we have a prophetic passage from Isaiah, imagining a future. This is a messianic text, so it's imagining a future redemption. And so God is going to, since God is the king, God is the ruler, in the future, there's going to be this redemption where everybody from, earth to the heavens is going to be punished for their wickedness. And God is going to reign over Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, right? So in terms of imagining the future, right? As far as Isaiah can imagine is redemption, right? Redemption in the land of Israel. God, the temple will be restored, the sacrifices will be resumed, and all of the nations of the world will come to Jerusalem and pay homage. Right? We've seen that before. That's about as far into the future as Isaiah can imagine. And I'm not sure that it's that idea is so different than any of the other passages, right? So let's say a future millions of years in the future when humanity doesn't, if humanity doesn't exist, right? I'm not sure that we have any awareness of that in the Bible, even a consideration of that, right? So God's future, God's eternity as King of the universe always includes humanity in some form or fashion. All right, now, two questions. To these same two questions, we're going to look at Adon Olam. We're going to look at the first three stanzas of Adon Olam and ask the same two questions. How does Adon Olam view God's kingship? And what is eternity according to Adon Olam? So we have Adon Olam asher malach v'terem kol yitzir nivra le'et nasa v'chefzo kol azai melech shemo nikra. Familiar words. Eternal Lord, that's how we translated Adon Olam. You could say Lord of eternity, perhaps. Asher Malach, who ruled. Malach is like Melech is a king. Malach is the verb past tense. Who ruled B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, before all beings were created. Right? When everything was made according to his will, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, then he was called king. Right? or Azai Melech Shemo, then king, his name was called. All right, so here we're talking about past tense. Next, v'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nara. And when all shall cease to be, he alone will reign supreme. So now we have yimloch in the future, right? We had malach, past tense, melech, present tense, and now we have yimloch in the future, right? V'hu haya, v'hu hoveh, v'hu yihiyeh, b'tifara. And he was, he is, and he will be crowned in splendor. All right, so we moved from the past tense to the future tense, and now we kind of have a summary conclusion, right? Was, is, will be. Good grammar lesson here for anybody who wants to work on conjugating. V'hu echad, ve'ein sheni, lahamshi lo lahachbira. Hu echad, he is one. Ein sheni, there is no second. Lahamshi lo is to compare to him. Lahachbira, here we have, or consort with him. Lahachbira, like a chaver, to be a friend with, right? God has no equal, no partner for God. Bli reshit, bli tachlit, velo ha'oz v'hamisra. Without a reshit, right? We have an echo of the beginning, bereshit, right? Without a beginning, bli tachlit, without an end. Velo means to him is ha'oz v'hamisra, the power and the dominion. All right, so what's our vision of God's kingship here, and what is eternity for God?
God is forever, and he will always be, he will reign forever.
Past, present, and future, separated out.
The God reigned even before creation.
And he'll reign
Created God.
even after
Yeah,
everything has ceased to be.
right. So we want to put this in cosmological terms. Before the Big Bang, God existed. And when the universe collapses, whenever that's going to be, God will continue to exist, right? That's what this is saying.
But
And-
what if,
Go on.
this is weird, but what about the earth, the world as we see it? What about the outer space and all that? I mean,
Well, this is written in like the 12th century. So
yeah, but yeah,
what was their, they certainly in that time, and I would imagine that if this is really being written during the golden age of Spain, they probably had a sense of a spherical earth and orbits of planets and things like that.
and when that would be included in, well, to me, that means God is ruler over everything.
Yeah, so when it says Olam in Adon Olam, what does it mean? Are we talking about time or are we talking about space?
Space, right?
I
The
don't
rest
know.
of
I
the
think
film
it's,
so
This
far
looks like
is
time.
focused on
I think it's time
Yeah.
before, now, and in the future.
So yeah, so we it's certainly a strong focus on time, but we also have a focus on creation itself, right? The term kol yitzir. Yitzir is not just beings. Yitzir is anything with form, right? So yatzar is to form something, to take mass and to give it shape. So a b'terem kol yitzir nivra. So before all form had been created.
Right. Yetzir is like Yotzer before the Shema, right? And
Yes.
Nivra is like Breshit bara, right?
Yes, right. So these are two words that are often used somewhat synonymously, but they're different though. Yitzir is to take mass, to take substance, and to give it shape, whereas Nivra is to create something out of nothing.
So I think it's interesting that there's the eternality that, I don't know what the word is, that they're really expressing, that like before things were created, God was there. Before the Big Bang, God was there. After there was form, that's when he was called king. And after all shall cease, he'll still be there. And I'm not so sure that in the 12th century, what, didn't they still think the world was flat? I mean, that's long before Galileo, and that's long before like Christopher Columbus, who said it's not flat, it's spherical. So I think they had like a lot of concept of things before their time.
Well, already the Greeks, so, I mean, Ptolemy knew that the world was round, and he measured it to a great degree of accuracy. And the in the golden age of Arabic culture, I mean, they were preserving all of the ancient knowledge and the ancient.
So they would have had access to that.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty confident.
The Europeans who are a little behind the times.
Yeah, I think the church didn't do a great job of being open-minded to evidence.
Or science, we should say.
Yeah, the notion that God created the Big Bang or created all of the universe and not just the creation of man on Earth is so. I mean, I don't know to what extent they were thinking about all that back then, but is quite enormous.
Yeah, there's nothing here about humanity.
Right.
Humanity is absent from this entire conversation. Look at, we put king in parentheses. There was nobody to call God king until God created something. Right? God may have been the ruler before anything existed and may be the ruler in the future after everything exists, but God needs something else in order to be called king. So who is it that is calling king? Is it the angels? Is it humanity? Is it creation itself? We saw in the psalm that we just looked at that this sense of like the thundering of the oceans, and we see this in other psalms, that nature kind of doing what it does is a form of acknowledging God, right? So maybe this is having a reference to that, but without God being able to relate to something else, God can't be known as king.
That's what I think what's kind of amazing about when you think about when this was written is that whoever wrote it had concepts that were way beyond their time, I think.
Literally.
Maybe. There's a book I want to read. I heard the author interviewed about the history of zero.
Oh,
right, which is actually
another concept.
Quite an important concept, quite significant. But can you imagine? I mean, for the concept of imagining non-existence, which is really what zero is. So it's not really a number, and it has, beyond just the math and the science, it has tremendous philosophical implications, and it has tremendous implications on theology, how we see ourselves in the world. This seems to have an awareness of that, right? We have the acharei kichlot hakol, kichlot, the ceasing of all, when all ceases. So
I still have always had problem with melech, with king, because king for me is just so worldly and so negative so much of the time that putting God and king together has always been.
God came first.
That's because you're a good American.
Yeah.
Right? We overthrow kings in this country. Back then, that's pretty much all you had.
Yeah, I understand. That's all you had to.
No, it is. I think in kind of more, especially recent times, the idea of king also feels extremely male as well. And if we're trying to get away from a gendered God, that can also be a barrier for us. In a lot of translations, you'll see people trying to avoid king. Maybe they'll use sovereign. Or Lord, or the problem is that Adon means Lord, and I'm not sure that Lord gets rid of the gender.
No, it doesn't.
The gender
because you have lords and ladies.
Yeah.
We can change king to queen.
Yeah, that doesn't solve the problem either. Yeah, so we have a dilemma. But we saw the dilemma. I think they were aware of the dilemma. I'm not sure they were concerned with the gender aspects of it, but just the anthropomorphic aspects of it, certainly.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So what kind of, as far as a human being, a human wrote this psalm. So what do we think about the experience of the person writing this?
I think he or she was way beyond their time. I mean, I think you just talk about concepts that were really advanced. To me.
Right. I don't know that we've seen any of this in any of the prayers.
Yeah, very abstract. And yeah, what are they drawing from? Right? Because Ani Smira, it's like, okay, they're doing expert things, weaving together all these biblical references, but you know where they're getting it from.
Well, yeah, I think Anim Zmirot is influence on kind of Kabbalistic notions in the 13th century. This seems much more based on philosophy and cosmology.
Rabbi, there's no room for the resurrection in any of these discussions. They've all vanished.
Well, yeah, there's no resurrection, no humans, no anything. I would say we have an extremely transcendent deity, right? That is absolutely alone, incomparable. I'm not sure how a human being can relate to this deity. All right, now here's the last two stanzas. V'hu Eli v'chai goali v'tzur chavli be'etzara. He is my God, my living Redeemer, my stronghold in troubled times. V'hu nisi umanosli menat kosi biyomekra. He is my sign and my banner, my cup when I call on him. Nisi can be a miracle, or it can be a banner. Manos li might be a refuge, like a place you would flee to. Biado afkid ruchi ve'et ishan ve'a'ira. In his hand, I trust my soul when I sleep and when I wake. V'im ruchi gviati Adonai li v'lo ira. And with my soul, my body too, Adonai is mine, I shall not fear.
Seems like we go from the very abstract to the very concrete, that it's talking about a person.
Yeah, it's all right. So you picked up, it's mine, right? And now we have the first person. Now we have the poet speaking.
This is more like a Psalm of David in parts.
Okay. What makes you say that?
The last four lines.
Last four lines. Yeah.
I shall not fear.
Other thoughts?
The other thing that comes to me is that this person is thinking these very abstract thoughts that don't talk about the human being. And then he ends kind of with this personal, but that he trusts that God will, in a way, make things okay. And he trusts that he's in God's hands. And maybe that reflects his feeling at the enormity of the universe that he expresses in the first part.
Yeah, I find it to be such a contrast. Right? If I only had the first part, I'd be like, I don't know where I'd be as a person of faith. Like, it's so distant. Like, I feel very alone.
But then
That's what I mean. You
Yeah.
take this enormity he's talking about of eternity and the universe, and then he personalizes it, that he trusts God within that enormity.
Yeah.
I think it takes the beginning for him to express the grandiosity of God before connecting personally. And the last stanza is so beautiful, and it really, in your mind and heart, it's about trust, and it's about your soul. It's not just about your body and the Israelites or whatever. It's like very personal. and then, you know, that God is just always going to be there for you.
Yeah.
You don't
And
have
by the
to
way,
feel
there's nothing about Israel. There's nothing that
Right.
makes this inherently Jewish.
No, it's a
Yeah.
person. It's a person.
Yeah.
And I
That's
wonder
kind of-
if all people of any religious persuasion don't, I mean, this could be anybody writing this, like you said. I mean, it
That's
doesn't
kind of
necessarily
the
have to be
beauty of it.
Jewish. Yeah. Beautiful.
Actually, looking at it like this makes it more beautiful to me than there's something about the different ways people sing Adon Olam.
Yeah.
They bring their own whatever to it. But about it like this and looking at it actually to me makes it even more beautiful.
Yeah, I
agree.
find the I find the words of Adon Olam to be incredibly moving.
I do too.
They
And
are.
I would say that the music that's sung to it should change dramatically between the first part and the last part. It has kind of a humdrum na 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 na, and then it just keeps repeating. But it seems like there should be a big shift as you get into this second set of stanzas.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I've never thought about that, but I guess what has bothered me about it is that, you know, we bring the kids up to lead Adon Olam at the end.
Oh my
of the
gosh.
program,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and here, like, we give them this, you know, incredibly personal theological journey. Right? Right. And we have little
Forget
kids
that.
to come up and lead us, and everybody's taking their taluses off, and
making up different tunes too.
and you know, the Lone Ranger tune, whatever, you know,
I know.
Hamilton,
I know.
and it seems by
It's almost sacrilegious.
by treating it as as just something to, like,
The barrier between you and lunch.
but even just like picking, like,
Yeah.
okay, well, what's the cleverest kind of fun popular tune I can use to sing Adon Olam?
Yeah.
Like, it seems like it really kind of does a disservice and
They're using
disrespect
it.
to.
Yeah.
What about having the children do something else? I don't know how long this tradition has been going on, but it really doesn't
long
match
time.
up.
Well, Sherry, I'm intrigued with your idea of having a melody that changes between after the first three
Okay.
stanzas. I've heard a lot of Adon Olam melodies. I'm sure you have also. I've never heard that.
That's a
And
great
it just
idea.
it feels like such an obvious thing to.
Do you want me to write one?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to keep the first half the way it is and then take off from there, or do an entirely?
I mean, at least that melody, the one we usually do, you know, da, 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 it has a somberness to it.
Right.
That,
Okay.
But you know, I always like new melodies.
Okay.
That are appropriate.
Yeah,
For the,
yeah.
for the words.
That's
Yeah,
what-
yeah, of course, of
Yeah.
course.
All right, let's look at. There are some biblical borrowings here, so let's take a look at that a little bit. So this is the fourth stanza, right? Hueli v'chai goali. Chai is life or living. Goali is my redeemer. All right. So I don't know exactly how to translate v'chai goali, life of my redeemer or something. I'm not sure what a good translation of that expression would be. But here, let's look at Job. So this is Job is one of his compatriots is trying to comfort him by telling him you must have done something wrong to merit all of this punishment that you are experiencing. And Job says the following: "Oh, that my words were written down! Would they were inscribed in a record, incised on a rock forever with iron, stylus, and lead." Hey, he got his wish. We're still reading him. But I know that my vindicator lives. In the end, he will testify on earth, right? So he says, Va'ani yadati goali chai. So goali here is translated as my vindicator. A goel can be a redeemer, but it can also be not in the sense of like, I'm going to save you, but I'm going to, like, here's an example. When Ruth, in the book of Ruth, this unnamed person is supposed to be redeeming the land that of her deceased husband, and then in so doing also, taking her as a wife. And so that person is referred to as the Goel, as the redeemer, because that's the kind of redemption that we're talking about. Or a Goel Dam, a blood redeemer, would be, this is like an eye for eye kind of thing, right? So somebody kills my brother, I have to go out and kill them or whatever, right? So then I become a blood redeemer. I've got to vindicate them. That's the sense I think that Job is referring to here. So he's referring to God. God eventually is going to come and is going to give testimony to redeem all the suffering that Job has gone through. So when is this going to happen? This, after my skin will have been peeled off, but I would behold God while still in my flesh. Job doesn't want to wait. I myself, not another, would behold him, would see with my own eyes. My heart pines within me. You say, how do we persecute him? The root of the matter is in him. Be in fear of the sword, for your fury is iniquity, worthy of the sword. No, there is a judgment. So this is Job, very angry at these attempts by his so-called friends to tell him, oh, you must have done something to deserve it. But what have we done here? We've taken these words, Goali Chai, my vindicator lives, and now switched them around and completely reversed the sense of what we're saying. Here, this person is being saved by God at a time when he feels abandoned. God's going to step in and save him, right? That he has that faith. Kind of the exact opposite of Job, but that's, we've seen a lot of that in the prayers. Look at the Hunisiu manosli, he's my sign and my banner. Minat kosi biyom ekra. A mana is a portion of my cup, biyom ekra, on the day that I call, literally. All right, so this is Psalm 16. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord, my benefactor, there is none above you. As to the holy and mighty ones that are in the land, my whole desire concerning them is that those who espouse another God may have many sorrows. I will have no part of their bloody libations. Their names will not pass my lips. Then we have our verse. Adonai manat chelki v'kosi, ata tomich gorli. The Lord is my allotted share and portion. You control my fate. All right, so this is very typical of many Psalms where the psalmist is very angry that he has a lot of people around him who seem to be not especially pious or good. And he feels very alone in his own,
Righteousness.
beliefs, his own righteousness. And he says, God, where are you? Why aren't you schmeisting all of these enemies? They're harassing me. What can't you do to them what they're doing to me? So here he is. He's saying, God, I have my faith in you. And look at all these other people, right? They're pouring out bloody libations to other gods, right? We have a sense of a cup of blood that they're pouring out. But for me, and he kind of has a pun on this bloody libations. God is my kos. God is my cup. The translation, this is a JPS translation. They just do menat chelki v'chosi. Really, the mana here is, I guess, is what they're getting at allotted. A mana is like the measurement, right? The measured out of my chelek, as my part, v'chosi, and my cup. So you control my fate. But what have we done? Menat chelki v'chosi. So we took menat kosi, the measure of my cup on the day that I call. So maybe this is a little bit more in keeping with the meaning in Psalm 16, although we're not really concerned about what all of these other people are doing, right? It's just when God is always there. God is my refuge at any at any time. I can run to God as my shelter. I can hold up, God is the banner that I'm going to rally towards. And now we have the last expression. Abe, you made a comment when we were looking earlier at the first psalm about God's kingship, or maybe you made the comment about the first part of Adon Olam. You were talking about the world to come. No sense of resurrection, the world to come, any of that. So keep that in mind with this final stanza. So, Biado afkid ruchi, into his hand I entrust my soul. Be'et ishan ve'aira, literally at the time I sleep and when I awaken. Ve'im ruchi gviati, and with my soul, the same soul we had. So we had get my pointer here. We have ruchi and ruchi. So the same soul that I've entrusted to God, with my soul, gviati. It's in my body, but gvia is really like my corpse. It's like just the physical shell of my body, without any of the animating soul inside of it. Adonai li v'lo ira. Adonai is mine, and I will not be afraid. I shall not fear. All right, so let's look at Daniel. This is a let's look. This is a famous line from Daniel. The last chapter. At that time, the great prince Michael, who stands beside the sons of your people, will appear. It will be a time of trouble, the like of which has never been since the nation came into being. At that time, your people will be rescued, all who are found inscribed in the book. That's Kol Hanimtza Katuv Basefer. And now, many of those that sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to eternal life, others to reproaches, to everlasting abhorrence. And the knowledgeable will be radiant like the bright expanse of sky, and those who lead the many to righteousness will be like the stars forever and ever. All right, so why is this such an important line in Daniel? Why is it so famous? Because it is the only explicit reference in the Bible to resurrection, the resurrection of the dead. Right? Those that sleep in the dust, that's Rabim Miyashenei Admat Afar. So Miyashenei is the sleepers, Admat Afar, the earth of the dust. And Yakitsu is to awaken. Right, so this is, and we've seen this idea of sleeping in the dust. We've seen reference to that. We saw it in the Amidah as a euphemism for death. And here they're going to awaken. Now, up in Adon Olam, we don't have an explicit. We're not relying upon this expression in Daniel. But we do have Be'et Ishan, at the time I sleep, Ve'a'ira, and when I arise, when I awaken. Now, the awaken is a different verb than we saw in Daniel, but we still have this idea of sleeping and awakening. So it raises the question if in Adon Olam, or whether in Adon Olam, the poet is talking about going to sleep at night, or whether he's talking about when he dies and having faith in resurrection. Because notice we also have ruchi gaviati, right, with my soul, my body also. So, and that was a kind of a core concept in the rabbinic ideas of the resurrection, is that the soul is going to be returned to the body. Right? I think it's probably deliberately ambiguous.
Yeah.
That it can mean both. We saw this at the very beginning of Birchot HaShachar with Modeh Ani, right, and Elohai Neshama. We have these prayers. We give Modeh Ani lefanecha, I give thanks to you, Melech Chai v'Kayam, King Chai v'Kayam, living and existing. Shehechazarta bi nishmati, who has returned into me my neshama, my spirit, bechem la rabba emunatecha, right? And with great faith and compassion, so something like that, beneficence. So that was the very first thing we say upon waking in the morning, is we thank God for restoring the soul to the body, right? We talked about this over a year ago, right? That when we go to sleep, our souls depart our bodies and they go on these journeys, and that's maybe what our dreams are. And in the morning, just before we awaken, the soul goes back to the body, and that's a gift of, it's an act of grace from God. And so we give thanks for it. If you recall, Adon Olam appears in Birchot HaShachar, right? It appears in those kind of morning wake up blessings. It was inserted there at some point into the Siddur, probably because of this last line, talking about returning the soul to the body. It is used in the ritual of Kriyat Shema al Hamitah, so the recitation of the Shema at the bed, right? So when we say the Shema at bedtime, there's a few other prayers that are thrown in there, and either all of Adon Olam or just this last line, the Biado line, are also included in it. Nobody knows, we don't know what the poet intended for Adon Olam, like if he intended it to be used in services at some point or not. All we know is how it was included in our Siddurim. And so we see it in different places, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end of services, the way we do it.
Is it known who wrote Adon Olam?
Well, that's what I was saying at the beginning. So it might have been Solomon Ibn Gabirol. That's the common attribution, but there's no proof of that.
Mm-hmm. I still think it's metaphorical here. Many of those that sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. I do believe it's, there are those who are found inscribed in the book, and many of those that sleep in the dust, for me, it's those who are not fully awakened yet.
Well, in the book of Daniel, Daniel was written during the Maccabean revolt, like the story of Hanukkah, like during the Maccabee, like those first 3 years of the fighting, that's when the book of Daniel was written. And so it's probably the latest kind of complete, work that made its way into the Bible, even though it's set in Babylonian times. It's set in Babylonian times, but really is speaking to those current times. And that was a time when this idea of resurrection and the world to come and the eternity of the soul in this way, that's when it was emerging as a widespread belief in Judaism. That's why we don't see any references to resurrection in earlier parts of the Bible. The Talmud goes to great lengths to try and identify, to try and prove that resurrection of the dead is contained somewhere in the Tanakh. Why is it so important? Is because this was a core rabbinic belief, and it was in opposition to, let's say, the Sadducees. The Pharisees believed in resurrection, the Sadducees did not. So it was very important to the rabbis to establish the truth of resurrection as a theological concept. And so I think it's one of the Babas in the Talmud tries to prove it, and it runs through like 10, 12 different attempts to prove that and they're trying with all they can to not use the Daniel verse, right? They want something in the 5 books of Moses, the earlier the better, and so they save the Daniel verse to the end, even though it's the only actual explicit reference. Now, of course, we can take this metaphorically as well. The Zohar is the title of the Zohar, this great mystical work, is based on this 3rd verse here. V'hamaskilim yazhiru kezohar harakia umatzdikei harabim kakochavim leolam va'ed. The knowledgeable, really the maskilim, which are the maskils, like the enlightened ones. The enlightened ones will be radiant, like the bright expanse of the rakia, the firmament, right? So we have this grand fate for the righteous. Yeah. So where does that leave us with Adon Olam? Are we talking about, putting one's trust, I have enough faith in God that I can go to sleep and trust that I'm going to wake up the next day? Or is that I'm going to live my life knowing that there's this, God who is the creator of the universe, is eternal in the infinite sense of the term, and yet I have faith that there is justice, and that while the justice may not be seen in this life, in this world, that there is a world to come. There is a resurrection in some form or fashion that is going to kind of bring balance to everything.
I like that notion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's that's what it means to have. I mean, for me, that's what it means to have faith, is to live our lives in the as if it matters in the face of an immense and seemingly uncaring universe. Right.
Yeah.
So to live a meaningful life despite that I think is what Adon Olam is expressing.
But Rabbi, are you saying that it would be to live a life as if it matters without expecting another chance at it in a resurrection?
No, I think there's probably a number of different ways to frame it. I'm not sure that the resurrection is that I get a second chance, as much as a sense that there is we live in a very imperfect world where there's plenty of suffering and things that just don't seem fair, right? So how do we keep going in spite of that, right? If we believe that there is something called justice, so like what, and the universe itself, I would suggest, doesn't seem to care that much one way or the other. It's kind of in our hands. We see this frustration expressed in the Psalms, in many of the Psalms, right? Where this guy, he's doing what he thinks he's supposed to do, and everybody around him is terrible, right? And so but it keeps going, right? And he's struggling to have faith. He wants God to step in and justify everything for him, but he's not seeing that. And so but he keeps going, and that's I think what living a life of faith is, right? So for me, it's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily that I literally believe in a future resurrection, but I think it's metaphorically, I can imagine what that perfected world would look like, what that world of more justice would look like, and if I can imagine that, then I can work towards that. And so for me, that's what all of the language around messianism is ultimately about.
Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah.
Other people, they see it very differently.
Yeah. I was thinking about, when I think about if there is any kind of messianic opportunity in the future, I personally would love to inhabit a different kind of species, to experience the world a different way, like be a bird or be another animal. And for me, that's like, sometimes I'm like, what do I do? Pray to God that I'll come back as a bird or something.
You like, sounds like karma.
Maybe.
All right. So here we have the whole thing all together now, where we start with Adon, Adon Olam, the Asher Malach. We start with the concept of king, which frankly has been all over our Siddur, right? We've seen Melech all over the place, right? Our bracha formula is, uses the term Melech. We started with Siddur, Rav Amram Gaon, trying to help us figure out how to get to 100 brachot, 100 times of invoking God as the Melech of Olam, of the world every day. And we end here with Adon Olam, also at least starting with Melech, but in the end, ending with, let me look at, Adonai is mine. I mean, what even an audacious thing to say. Right? What does the bracha say? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Like, blessed are you, Adonai Eloheinu, our God, right? Not quite as intimate, not quite as personal. I think I mentioned before Nathan Englander's translation, Lord God of us, rather than my God, because how can we have the audaciousness to claim ownership of God? But that is exactly what Adon Olam does. It claims ownership of God.
But that doesn't mean only for the, I mean, it would be your connection with God, but doesn't mean that billions of other people can't
Of
have.
course.
Sure.
Yeah. Oops. Any other comments or reactions to Adon Olam?
There's a lot of alliteration and rhyming and all that, or it felt that way to me. As well, when we sing it all the time, I feel like we're
So
saying,
yeah.
All
right. So what is it doing? So first of all, we have, and we've seen a lot of this. The Psalms, they follow this form of the parallelism, where we say the same thing twice in different words. So Adon Olam Asher Malach, right? So the ruler, eternal Lord who reigns supreme. B'terem kol yitzir nivra, before all beings were created. So we have a little bit of that parallelism in.
I think a little later on, but
Yeah.
Who Eli V'chai Goali V'tzur Hav.
Yeah, there we've got a kind of a triplet.
Yeah, and then V'chu Nisi Umanos.
Yeah.
Manakosi. I mean, if you don't know what you're reading, like usually me.
So, but this is not a biblical form though, because it has rhyme and meter, which we tend to not have. And here it's a very deliberate meter, right? Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Le'ein Nasa V'chef. Right, it's why any melody you want can fit to it.
Yeah.
So, and it's got a very easy rhyme as well. Maybe that's why we give it to kids, because it's so easy.
Oh, maybe.
Well, the meter is all based on powers of 2. So it's 4 feet with 2 syllables in a foot and then 4 lines in a stanza.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Max. Okay.
So sometimes I'll give a drash. It feels a little cheesy to do right now, but I'll do it anyways. So yeah. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra.
Oh, I hear the horse going, so that's probably why we do. What's the piece that people
heartbeat.
Are using?
Right.
What's that?
It's a heartbeat.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Got it.
So the person, and the kind of the story I imagine is you've got somebody who goes out, who's feeling alone in the universe, goes out at night, looks up at the stars, and just sees the vastness of everything and feels so alone. And then he hears his own heartbeat, and he realizes God isn't out there, but that God is in here, and that gives him the comfort that he needs to feel safe and to go on and live another day. That's my story for so, I don't know. Sherry, I hope this has given you a lot of things to think about for the composition you're going.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, do I change the rhythm, or is that now problematic after what you said? So
I hope that when we're in services and we end our services with Adon Olam and Anim Zmirot on Yom Tov, that this can maybe help characterize all of the prayers that we've just finished, right? And that ultimately it is supposed to be something that's incredibly personal, and that the ambiguities, the difficulties of faith, can't be solved, right? We have to live with them, and so but we can express those difficulties, and that I think makes it more meaningful when we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to put a pause in this class for now, for the next couple of months. We've gotten to the end of the Shabbat morning service, and it only took us, I think, 47 sessions to do.
Wow.
So,
Not bad.
What's the next course going to be?
I don't know. I'm open to suggestions.
Well, you mentioned Solomon, who you think may have written this, Adon Olam, and you sound like you're a scholar. on
No,
him.
no. It was one of the hardest classes. Not at all.
Okay,
Yeah.
forget that. Okay.
I mean, we could try to attempt it. It does exist in translation, and he has both secular. I'll also dig out my notes, but he has both secular and religious poetry. So maybe we could look at some samples.
I have a comment about that. So this is such an incredibly beautiful piece of poetry, if you will.
Yeah.
In those days, didn't they sign their name to their works of art?
Sometimes they did, not all the time.
Surprises me.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. So sometimes they did, and maybe it might be that more of the ones where there's a pattern, where it's alphabetical, or they spell out some words, or they spell out their name. Maybe more of a higher percentage of those entered into the Siddur just because it makes them easier to remember.
mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, it gives them a gimmick, perhaps.
It's really beautiful.
But yeah, I've never heard of I don't think Adon Olam spells out anything. Unfortunately.
So I have a comment about the class. It was very special during the pandemic, I found. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for me too. I mean, this has been, I've been wanting to do something like this for a long time. And I think when the pandemic started, it provided a good opportunity to finally do it. So I really enjoyed it, and I learned a tremendous amount.
I think it's been really valuable.
Yeah. And Sinai's done a great job of doing a lot of online, if not, hybrid experiences since the pandemic started. So hats off to you and Joelle for
Thank
making
you.
all that happen.
Yeah,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right, hope
Thank
to see
you.
everybody soon.
Yes.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
vacation.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So long, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.